everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is co-host Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing well, because we have a good guest today,
Yes.
a true Texan, another physician, and somebody that was with me in politics, helped me when I was running a race a few years ago, and actually from the Galveston area, so I know him. His name is Robin Armstrong. Robin, welcome to our program.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Yes, and Robin lived in this area. He was at Lamarck High School and UTMB Medical Center and Texas A&M. So he's really well groomed for this geography here, but he's well groomed for another issue, and that happens to be the discussion going on in the coronavirus with the chloroquine. He's done some research on that and some reporting on this, and he's taken care of a lot of patients, which means a whole lot. And he's getting all kinds of calls now. I can't imagine him getting so much time that he could come and be on our program today. But Robin, it's really nice to have you with us.
It's an honor to be with you today, Dr. Paul.
Okay, I think we'll start off with, the big issue today on this subject is the chloroquine, and our president, he had the audacity to tell the truth and say, yeah, I'd take it, thought it was a good idea. And I've often thought about this, the president gets treated a little bit differently, obviously. They can't just be on their own. But in a way, why couldn't they be? Why couldn't the president, say, I take medication. I had a sore throat last week and I took some penicillin. But of course, under the circumstances, everybody has to know everything. But chloroquine, that is really a step. What was your immediate reaction when you heard that the president took it, set it out directly, then all of a sudden the roof came down. The enemies, the political enemies, came down pretty hard. What right does he have to do this? Doesn't he know he's going to kill himself? I mean, what was your reaction to all that?
My reaction was the media is so anti-Donald Trump that and this medication has taken on a life of its own. It's amazing to me. I thought to myself, well, good for him. He's taken the medication under his doctor's use, and it's his doctor thinks that it's good for him and it's going to help him. I think that's fantastic, and it also sort of it gives us a little bit of support as well, who are out here who have treated folks with it, because it's amazing to me how we looked at studies from China and studies from France. We look at it, it's given to healthcare workers prophylactically now in India. It's given all over the world. The whole world is using this medication to treat this COVID-19. And so it makes no sense that there is so much anxiety and anger towards it on the left here. It makes no sense at all, but it's just par for the course. It's how they act. It's what they do when they have an issue that's just under their skin. And this hydroxychloroquine has been one. It's been amazing.
Yeah. Somebody else had to chime in on this whole thing going on there by the name of the presidential candidate, former Vice President Biden. Boy, he was alarmed. This is totally irresponsible, and I don't think Biden has ever done anything irresponsible. So, and this sort of fits into your point that it becomes politicized rather rapidly, and I guess it's going to be that way for a while.
The irony is that Joe Biden probably would benefit from taking hydroxychloroquine, and to be honest with you, as we know liberals are, he probably is taking it. He's probably taking it now, and he's just criticizing the president for saying he was taking it.
Very good, Daniel.
Well, Dr. Armstrong, as more and more data comes out about this pandemic, this outbreak, it really looks like it's increasingly a massive death of people in senior citizens' homes. I mean, some states it's even the majority of people who died were in senior care facilities. You happen to actually do some trials, to do some testing of this drug. I think it was in a nursing home in Texas City. Tell us a little bit give us the whole story of what happened, what you found out, what the results were in Texas City.
Sure, absolutely. And so what we did was we were not planning on doing any kind of study or trial or anything like that. We really were not. We were just treating folks. So as a hospital doctor, we had used hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, and zinc. We had used that medication in the hospital to treat patients very effectively. And so we saw that. I actually treated patients in the hospital with it. And so then we had this outbreak at the nursing home. And the way that began was there were 3 physical therapists in the nursing facility who started having symptoms and tested positive for COVID-19. And so at that point, since the physical therapists had worked with everyone in the nursing facility, the health department here in Galveston County decided to test all of the staff and test all of the residents in that facility. And when the results came back, we had 52 residents that were positive. We had 31 staff members that were positive there at the nursing facility. And so we were really concerned at that point, because in Tennessee, what they did at the nursing facilities, they just unloaded the nursing homes, and they had a parade of ambulances there with taking folks to the hospital, which we thought was a horrible idea for the patients and their mortality, and just you were spreading it throughout the community that way. In Washington State, we saw 27 residents die in those nursing facilities. And so we were really alarmed. And so we thought, I thought, well, we have this medication that's been fairly effective in the hospital. Why don't we try that here? They're medications that are not dangerous. They have a very low risk profile to them. And so we decided, why don't we try to treat those patients with it here? And so I was able to get some medications from the State Board of Pharmacy through the hospital with the help of our lieutenant governor and the state senator here in Texas. And so we were able to get those medications and start treating those patients. 35 out of 38 that we treated recovered, and which is significant. And we had only one that died from COVID-19. There were 2 others that died about a week or 2 later from complications from COVID-19. And so we really had positive results. And these are folks, we checked EKGs on them, and we did not see any cardiac side effects in any way on these patients. And so it was a good outcome, but it's amazing. You would not think that happened by the media reports and what they're trying to do with the story. It's just amazing, but we're happy. The families are happy. The patients are happy. And so we're pleased with the results.
Well, good. I'm glad you're getting some attention, because the other side's gotten a lot of attention, right. Especially the people who control the media and produce all these stats that go out and show percentages. And from the very beginning, I was suspicious of that, because they don't know how many people, are positive and what the real statistics are and how many people are dying. I'm sure you have thought about this, that these statistics sometimes can be way off, and I don't know what the solution is, other than the fact that people should be more honest with what they do and not can the statistics. For instance, I think that the people dying from coronavirus probably is not as high as they would say, because, of course, coronavirus gets put on the death certificate without too much difficulty. And I was wondering whether you came across any examples where the doctors have been encouraged to use that term more than they should.
Well, I'll tell you, there are instances where yes, that is the case. There is a financial incentive to it to some degree, and so I haven't personally been asked to do that, but it is it certainly does happen. So I agree with you. I believe the denominator is actually lower, and I think the numerator actually is probably. The numerator is actually lower. The denominator is actually much higher, because I think there's a lot more folks, a lot more cases of people who have been infected who are actually not counted, because we haven't done tests on everyone. And so I really believe that the mortality rate for this disease is probably going to be quite low. I suspect it's going to be less than 1%. Mm-hmm. But you can't. You can't financially incentivize physicians or hospitals, or nursing facilities or what have you, to put COVID-19 on the death certificate. I think that's just the wrong way to go, because that's what you get. You get the numbers that are inflated. And so I believe that, yes, that is happening. I believe the mortality rate is actually quite low. It's about 3% now, I believe, 3 to 4%. I think it's going to probably be less than 1% at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, doctor, certainly it doesn't diminish the seriousness of the disease. Sure. To want to look at the data objectively, because that's how we deal with it. That's how we're realizing it really is predominantly, at least to a large degree, a sickness of elderly folks and folks in nursing homes. But
Right.
the pushback is that chloroquine doesn't work and it can be harmful, and we've done tests that show that. So there. What did these tests do wrong? What did they get wrong that you think that you got right in your testing on it?
Well, I think what happened was, I think most of the studies that have been done have tested hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin in hospitalized patients who are very ill. And my contention has always been that you have to use it earlier for it to be effective. And if there have been studies that have done in China that actually show the mechanism of how it works. And the way they think it works is it prevents the virus from docking onto the cell. And so it prevents its functioning that way. And so if the viral load in a patient is already very high and they're already very sick, then it's not going to be very effective. And it is a pill. If patients gets hospitalized, and I think that probably if they're critically ill, remdesivir or plasma infusion is probably a more appropriate therapy. But all those studies, every one of those studies have been done in patients who were critically ill, and where I don't think that you're going to get as much benefit. And so I think you need to start it much earlier is what my contention is. And I haven't seen a study that's really shown what happens when you start it early.
Right, and I think eventually somebody's going to come up with the actual harm done by the shutdown, the negative effect on health. And when I think about it, I thought, well, how many people do I know personally that came out positive? I don't really know anybody, and I don't know. I've heard of a person that had died of it. We do hear those stories, but I don't know anybody that got it and died from it. But right now, what I'm hearing, members of my own family and others and friends who have negative effects from the shutdown. This whole thing, remember how they sent those 2 big ships up there, hospital ships, and nobody showed up? Hospitals were closed down, people were laid off, and the beds were empty, and people were intimidated, including myself. If I'd have had to go, I'd be frightened to go, not because of the medical thing, but because of what's going to happen and all the testing and the rigmarole, and they're going to put you on a list. And the more I see this, the more dangerous it finds. And now they're finding out that they don't follow any ethical rules. Some of this information is being turned over to the legal authorities. And I think that is, I think you're going to later on, and maybe you even know of some cases where people suffered because they couldn't get their medical care or were intimidated by what was going on.
Well, absolutely. What happened early on is when the governor issued some of his executive orders, the medical board actually was very aggressive in issuing rules and how they were going to sanction physicians if they did not follow these executive orders. And so it just put a chilling effect on physicians. And so I got a call from a friend in the Dallas area who's politically active, and I don't know her that well, but she's politically active and knows me. And so she told me that her loved one was not able to get life-saving ovarian cancer surgery that was scheduled for early March because she could not have a quote-unquote elective procedure. Now, in my opinion, life-saving ovarian cancer surgery is not an elective procedure, but it was considered as such in this case. And that happened because physicians became very nervous about doing so. The surgeon who was going to provide the service or do the surgery was nervous that he was going to be sanctioned by the medical board if he performed this procedure. And so they were just told, no, you can't have this. I suspect that there's stories like that all over the country, certainly all over Texas, where people were actually harmed by not having their quote unquote elective procedure done. That doesn't seem particularly elective to me.
Right.
Yeah, I think when the smoke clears, that's going to be a huge death toll as well. How many other cancer patients, thousands, tens of thousands, ended up with from a treatable cancer to a terminal situation? It's just horrible. But Dr. Paul opened up with a little bit of talk of politics, and politics, I think, is playing a role in this. The trust of science seems to be a cover for, listen to what we say or else. Dana Milbank writes for the Washington Post, and he's as insider as it gets. Dr. Paul wrote about it this week. He thought it was hilarious that the people of Georgia were going to die when they opened up the state. Of course, as usual, completely wrong. Well, he thinks it's hilarious that Trump is taking hydroxychloroquine. He thinks it's hilarious that he's going to get sick. He made a joke about how President Trump, this is yesterday's column of his, if he likes this, he'll like drinking camel urine as well, and went through all of the strange folk cures that people are using, suggesting that Trump should put himself up as a human guinea pig and allow himself to be the FDA tester. You know, we're a non-political show here, but there certainly seems to be, they hide behind trust the science, but it seems to us, particularly when you look at red state versus blue state, who's opening and who's closing, this has taken on a big political component. And I know as a medical doctor, you may not want to talk about politics, but I do sense that you're interested in politics. So maybe you can sort of bring the two of those together for us.
You know, I have, it's been extremely disappointing to watch how politics has played a role in this. You know, I have always, you know, I'm very active politically, but I've always kept my politics and my medicine separate. You know, it's kind of ironic that it's come together in a situation where, you know, I was just treating patients. I wasn't trying to make a political statement at all. But I'll tell you, but healthcare is used by liberals and by Democrats to gain control. And I can remember watching some General Electric tapes by Ronald Reagan, and he said, you know, that healthcare, you know, it tugs at the heartstrings of Americans, of Republicans and Democrats. And so the liberals certainly are using healthcare to gain more and more control over our society and over people and over individuals, because that's by nature who they are. And I think that is just, I think it's unfortunate, but it's typical, but it is who they are. And so it's not surprising, but it is very disappointing. And so, and I believe that you look at all the things that they can do with this. They're growing the size of government tremendously. We're spending more than we've ever spent, which is right exactly what the liberals want to do. They're using all this control, you know, it's about contact tracing and how they're going to follow people, and they want to use technology to try and follow the movements of folks. And so that's just scary stuff. It's very Orwellian, and it's very scary to think about how our government can use the technology and the power that they have, and they're using healthcare to do it. And so it's not surprising to me that they're using it, but we have to, I mean, liberty-loving people who love freedom, we better rise up. I mean, what surprises me more than anything is that we have actually allowed this to go on for this long.
Right.
You know, and I'll tell you, as I will not do this again. You know, I will be at the forefront and say no. You know, I'm not staying in my house. I'm not going to follow these rules anymore, because I just do not. I believe that we've gone way too far. I think that there are people who are controlling and totalitarian who are taking notes right now, and they're saying, wow, this is the way that we can control them, through fear. And so we as a country really, I hope that and pray that we're learning a lesson here to say, you know, there are people who will use this to their advantage to try and take control over our bodies, over our health, over our country, over our finances. And I think that's actively happening today.
Right, and you speak like a true Texan. I love it. But you had mentioned to me along the same line was that you were a little bit surprised of the coordination or collusion of, say, the media and the lawyers and the doctors at times and the politicians, and that they seem to come together in a certain procedure and all of a sudden do what, you know, Daniel pointed out, something that had been known, the chloroquine, been around for a long time, then all of a sudden it became like a toxin. So what were you referring to when you said that some of these groups sort of worked together and blended together where you had not seen that before?
So intuitively, I think I thought about it intuitively, but I've never experienced it. I've experienced it this time, where what I saw was the legal profession. So something happens, and the legal profession, now their goal is just to make money. So they want to sue, and they want to sue everybody and make money. But they work with the bureaucrats, and the bureaucrats can be Republican and the bureaucrats can be Democrat. And so they work with the bureaucrats and the regulators to actually, so they make a complaint to the regulator or the bureaucrat, then the bureaucrat then does an investigation, which they say by statute they have to do. And so the bureaucrat does an investigation, and then so the investigation is done by the bureaucrat, so the lawyer doesn't have to spend the money on the investigation. So he can get all the information from them, and then the media just takes the side of the Democrat Party. They just want to criticize anything that is conservative or that is right-leaning, and so the media is involved with it. The media puts pressure on the regulators. So if it's a Republican regulator, then they put pressure on them, and then oftentimes the regulators will bow down to that. And so it's just there, and then the Democrats just take advantage of the whole thing. And so it's been unfortunate. It's been amazing to me to see this happen, and this in a coordinated fashion. I don't know that they're all working together, but they certainly seem to be working together and colluding together to increase the size of government, take liberty away from individuals, stifle creativity in business operations. In the setting of a pandemic, what they've done here is they have actually made a lot of physicians very fearful of prescribing a medication that could be potentially saving thousands of lives. And so they've gotten in the way of physicians practicing medicine. And so it's amazing to me. The FDA gave emergency use authorization to use hydroxychloroquine in this pandemic setting on March the 28th. Weeks later, they reversed that. And so they reversed that because of media pressure. And so a lot of physicians after that were very nervous about prescribing hydroxychloroquine because they thought they were going to get in trouble with their with their medical boards across the country. And so it's just, they're all working together, and we as freedom-loving people really have to fight back on the grassroots level and hold our elected officials accountable, making sure that they're holding the bureaucrats accountable.
Daniel.
I just have one last question, Doctor, and it really is kind of the nexus of politics and medicine, and you're active in politics. But our governor here, Greg Abbott's been certainly a lot better than a lot of the governors in the country. There's no question about that. He's not been like the tyrants up in Michigan or elsewhere, but he has taken a pretty go-slow approach to opening up the state, and a lot of people are frustrated with that go-slow approach. You've been in the trenches of COVID here in Texas. If the governor were to call you up and say, I need some advice, doctor, what should I do? What would you tell him?
I would say that I think that the data now, certainly in Texas, we've had about 1,400 deaths in Texas, which is horrible, horrible for anybody to die, but out of 28, 29 million people, that's just not a really high mortality rate. I think that there are ways that we can be wise. I think we need to trust the people of Texas and trust that the people of Texas are going to make wise decisions and trust that the people of Texas are going to be able to take care of themselves and their families, which I know, everyone wants to do. And so I think in that way, I think I would have been probably a little more aggressive about opening things up because I think that the people of Texas are smart. And I think that you have to trust people with their freedom and their liberty. And you just have to trust folks to do the right thing and make the right decisions. Certainly put guidelines in place, put things in place to keep people safe. But I think we can trust people. And at the heart of liberalism is they really don't trust people.
Right.
So I don't think mandates are necessary. I don't think, I don't think that this necessary. I don't think you have to be punitive towards folks like some of our medical boards across the country have been, but I think you just need to put guidelines in place and say, listen, folks, be wise, follow these guidelines. And I think you'd be amazed at what's happening in Georgia, what's happening in Texas. We're seeing a decrease in the number of cases, despite the fact that we're opening up now. I'm going to ask a question along that line, but you've really answered the question the way I see it.
There's two ways to deal with problems, social problems or economic problems or whatever. There's one that's a voluntary approach, voluntarism versus authoritarianism. And you know, if you look back, there have been a few epidemics in this country, quite frequently for that matter, and they're almost forgotten events because they haven't followed through with this lockdown. So I am so delighted, Robin, that you're taking the position of this voluntarism and approach, and you're in a position where you can have a lot of influence because you speak with credibility. But I want to thank you very much for being with us today.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. It's an honor.
Very good. And I want to thank our viewing audience today for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.